The girl is being carried on the back of a handsome young man with firm abs, running through the forest. They need to head northwest quickly and with extreme caution. He has been continuously praying to the gods, asking if they truly exist, to help him just this one time. It has been 6 months since they both fell into this insane world, and now they have no other choice. It seems they are trying to escape from some dark force chasing them. Everything for the two of them is gradually getting out of control. Today this girl cried all her tears on the prince's bed. After becoming a sacrificial lamb and losing her virginity, she just wanted to die. But now she is running away in the arms of another man named Viken. This man is trying to protect her, and his actions have led them to a dead end, with the furious prince standing right in front of them. 6 months ago in the sanctuary, a girl was trying to look at the corpses in front of her with a disgusted expression. She couldn't believe she had to work on her day off just because she accidentally spilled a few drops of water from the vase. She didn't know whether to blame herself for spilling the water or blame the archbishop for appearing at that exact moment. The ceremony had ended a week ago, and if these bodies in front of her did not wake up, they would soon be sent back to their families. The people in the sanctuary must be very disappointed. They had prayed for 1,000 days for that ceremony, yet no sacrificial object had woken up. But unexpectedly, she suddenly saw a strange phenomenon. The girl lying in the coffin moved. The sacrificial object moved, and the priests quickly gathered around. This person was the daughter of the Rommel family, and she remembered that the last thing she did was argue with her sister and run away from home. But what happened after that, and after a traffic accident, she was no longer in the human world. She woke up in confusion because her soul and body had been separated. However, after a few days, she would quickly get used to it even though she currently didn't understand what the other girl was saying. Her throat ached, making it impossible to speak, and she couldn't even move. The woman approached her to massage her after she woke up, because it was clear she couldn't move. Was this place a hospital, and was this woman a nurse? The prince came in at that moment, and seeing her, felt a headache coming on, but now she belonged to him. Her value would rise quickly, and he would send a letter to the Rommel family. This letter would inform them that the poisonous flower in the summer garden had bloomed, congratulating them on selling their daughter for the best price possible. He confirmed once again that the content of the letter would enrage the reader, but he didn't care. Then came the forceful kiss, despite her resistance by not using her tongue, which made him furious. Regria would be her name from now on, and to her this man was a complete madman. This was the royal palace of the Belegram Empire, and it had been 5 days since she arrived in this world. Now she could move her arms and the upper part of her body, but she still couldn't walk and had to hold on to things around her. The only thing she could see from the window was the garden surrounding the castle. While she wished she knew where this place was, a strict-looking housekeeper came to her. They only spent a few minutes each day checking on her, so she didn't think they were doing anything suspicious or illegal. But every time she made even the slightest sound, they would come into the room to check on her. Surely they were taking care of her because she couldn't walk, making escape impossible. Perhaps she shouldn't offend anyone until she found a way to escape from here. She had to stay calm and hide her emotions. If not a genius, she should at least know how to conceal her emotions. She must be very calm, neither laugh nor cry. In the past, if her sister couldn't concentrate on playing the piano because of her, the consequences would be severe. Her mother always told her such things, thinking her sister was very sensitive to how others viewed her. If she had nothing to do, she should quickly stay away from her sister. He fed her some fruit to break the heavy atmosphere while she kept thinking about her past, but she still couldn't understand what language he was speaking with his servants. At this moment, he quickly introduced himself as Rahik Vareshal Belegram. For the past 5 days, he had repeatedly said such words as if this name belonged to her, even though she vehemently refused. But when she tried to introduce herself, intending to say her own name, she couldn't remember what it was. She was the twisted bitch of the upper class, a distorted personality, or the flower filled with poison in the summer garden. This girl could drink pesticide and not die and was the nightmare of the entire kingdom. Her name was Beatrice Rommel. In the archbishop's office of the royal palace, Rakich went mad upon hearing these words. Why did that bastard dare to mention the future crown princess like that? And he was trembling before the prince's fury. This was the archbishop of the high temple of the Belegram Empire. He explained that the soul of the deity would choose to reside in the body of the most compatible sacrificial object. He had actually thrown a dossier over 10 meters long on the table, which his men had brought back after investigating Beatrice Rommel. What particularly caught his attention were the last 3 lines, stating that she had used a shard of glass to blind her younger brother for reasons unknown. She had been severely punished by her family and then volunteered to become a sacrificial object for the deity. But this person would soon live in the royal family and become the crown princess. Countless commoners wished to be blessed by the woman from the divine world. Therefore, Regria had to be perfect because there were only 6 months left until the wedding. During that time, she had to completely shed her mediocrity and become a noble crown princess. The gods, when realizing the circumstances they faced, would typically have similar reactions: crying, anger, going mad, or denial, closing their eyes and ignoring the truth. But she was seriously accepting everything without causing any trouble, as if she had learned to endure reality since she was a child. At this moment, she tried to remain calm with him, merely wanting to ask for a map, but she probably failed. Rahich was smiling subtly, making her feel uneasy, as if he thought controlling her was as easy as manipulating a puppet. She thought she should at least learn a bit of the language here, and until then, tried to be as obedient as possible. She would eat and wear whatever they gave her, not expecting that such dependency from a living being could bring him so much satisfaction. She was the result of the divine sanctuary's 1,000 days of prayer for the summoning ceremony. Every creature in the world would bow at her delicate feet, and she would be his crown princess. As he approached, intending to pin her down, she quickly pushed him away and asked for something that could reflect her face: a mirror. According to him, she could now use at least 4 different divine languages. This was truly impressive because even in this world, only the royal family and linguists studied that many languages. He said she would get to see herself in the mirror during the spring festival, so she should try to wait until then. Even though she didn't understand what he was saying, since her mood seemed good, he ordered the servants to bring her some light snacks. He would go to the sanctuary to prepare for the spring festival and quickly went down to the basement where the priests were waiting. The priest mentioned that perhaps not being able to communicate with her must have been discouraging for him, but he merely thought it felt like raising a pet. The priest was very worried, thinking he might not be satisfied with her, considering that the sacred sacrificial object came from the Rommel family alone was concerning. Duke Rommel had found every reason to maintain a neutral stance, but now he could be drawn towards the royal family. Duke Rommel had considered bringing his daughter back, with rumors that he intended to marry her off to the lord of the Severett family. These people also maintained a neutral stance, but now things had turned out this way. Although there hadn't been an official announcement, revealing which family the crown prince would lean towards would undoubtedly cause an uproar throughout the kingdom after the ceremony. This would indeed be a spectacle worth witnessing. They will tremble with fear, afraid that the crown princess might be a fierce dog, but they don't understand that a poisonous flower can also become medicine if used correctly. If the 2 of them had a child with a bold personality like Lady Beatrice, they could conquer the entire continent. But right now, perhaps he was getting too carried away with these flattering words. He cautiously asked where he would be staying after the sacred spring celebration. He could rest here at the sacred sanctuary, just like staying in his own royal palace. After all, the sacred sanctuary is a place where all knights can find peace. The holy knights are extraordinary beings, and they form the foundation of the Belligram Empire's strength. The holy knights are born with the blood of the divine. If the mother is a deity, she can only bear one child. They will be born with a powerful blessing regardless of gender. The blessing of the gods first appeared among knights in the 15th century. This allowed them to use their newfound strength freely. However, these things are essential for their existence. Without a deity by their side, knights would lose control over their powers. He had seen knights go mad when the gods refused to bond with them. If the gods could manage these madmen, everything would be much better. His mother was brought by the gods, and the emperor should have comforted and soothed her, but he couldn't do it. That's why their relationship turned sour. Today he came to announce that a war with the Aratum kingdom was imminent. He had to find the crown princess before the battle commenced. His blessing would only be effective with the crown princess by his side. Being drawn to a deity is the fate of the holy knights, and this was true for Herich, so he would have to listen to Regria. He had to kneel before her as if worshipping her fragility. Growing up, he had seen knights go mad for not finding a soulmate to bond with, and even knights who self-destructed after the death of their partners. He would not go down that wrong path. He would tame her, so everyone should quickly prepare for the spring festival. There was a savage he had imprisoned in the dungeon who, although not eating anything, would have a long lifespan. He would eat the bugs on the walls to survive, and that savage was Viken. Two little girls were in the forest, happily challenging each other about the extremely rare plants. Mormala was a special herb. It only grew in the sacred forest surrounding the holy sanctuary. The gods would consume food sprinkled with this powder or inhale its fragrance. They would feel more comfortable and their bodies would become more receptive to this new environment. Most importantly, this herb made the gods less vigilant towards humans in this world. Perhaps the reason Regria was so calm was thanks to this powder. People said that a few others before her usually got angry, but Regria was different. She had very clear eyes. While the two were praising her, another girl got angry. Was Celine trying to use this foolish girl to get promoted? These people were working hard here, while that woman never ate the food they prepared. They didn't understand why they had to serve her just because she was divine. Did that mean they were lowly beings here? Gathering herbs was their job, and surely she wasn't any happier about it. At this point, the other girl couldn't take it anymore and angrily grabbed Celine by the collar, lifting her up and uttering threats. It was said that humans were adaptable, but here no one taught her their language. However, if she just sat here and listened to them talk, she would only understand a few words. For example, today it would rain. The servants understood that she had been locked up here for quite a while, so she must feel suffocated. Today the prince wanted to have tea with her in the holy garden, so she could go there to improve her mood. Even though it would rain, she still didn't understand what they were saying, but she was glad to have successfully communicated something with them. Since this was the first time she left her room, the prince wanted to give her special care. These were the newest dresses created by the most famous designer in the upper class here. These outfits had bows larger than her face, and the gorgeous ball gowns and even the sexy clothes were all hers. But now she had to go for tea, so they had to prepare quickly. At this moment, Harich also came to expedite the process. However, he seemed unsatisfied with this dress, even though he was the one who chose it. He made another choice himself, which was a collar. He gently put it around her neck, which only confirmed her belief that this man must be insane. Everyone could understand that she didn't want to wear this thing at all. She was a person, not a dog. Someone clicked their tongue, and even those around found her pitiable, but he held her in his arms and said that she shouldn't hurt herself anymore because her body belonged to him now. Fine, let him do whatever he wanted. She had long abandoned this body. Clearly, no one here was willing to extend a hand to help her. He was the one holding the power here, but her head felt like it was splitting in two. One side told her to stand up and do the same to him, but suddenly her body lost all its strength, and she collapsed into his arms. When she woke up, she was lying in the garden with a thin blanket covering her. She didn't understand where she was. As soon as she woke up, a servant rushed over to take care of her. Her sudden fainting had scared everyone. The servant asked to postpone her tea time due to her unstable health. Despite this, the prince still wanted to have tea with her, even though it was clearly inappropriate. She had to tell the servant to calm down because at this speed she couldn't keep up. But she didn't know how worried the servant was, so she hoped she would never do that again. Otherwise, she would indeed be in big trouble. She felt frustrated because if she and they spoke the same language, everything would have been much easier. After the servant left to call the palace's private doctor, she saw two people in the distance carrying a basket, wandering around the garden. They were angry because they didn't understand why they had to gather these things in the rain, and now their feet were soaked. A servant saw her and wondered why she had a dog collar around her neck while they were working, and that thing was just sitting and resting comfortably. At that moment, the green-haired servant pushed her friend down and asked if she saw the thing wearing the dog collar. If they wanted to be her servant, they would have to use her. She sat in the pavilion, not understanding what they were doing, and it seemed that a girl was being bullied. It turned out they were betting on whether she would care about the servant girl, and her just sitting and watching proved she didn't care. So they shouldn't dream of becoming her servant. But today she didn't understand what was happening here. Now, if someone told her she was abducted by aliens, she would believe it. She couldn't stand still watching them bully each other like that, and her body started moving on its own, following the voice inside her head. The servant girl was being forced to bark like a dog, and tonight they would have a game just for her, telling her to be prepared. Luckily, at that moment, she reached the servants and told them to quickly come to her. The green-haired servant was very angry because her fun was interrupted, but couldn't do anything other than obediently walk towards her. She didn't understand what was happening here, but her body was moving on its own. She even used the language of this world and spoke to them. She told the bullied servant not to kneel on the ground anymore, but to come and stand by her side. This made the green-haired servant, who had just been slapped, feel incredibly unfair. She said she was just punishing her friend for not doing her job well. She was the leader among the priests in training, so she had the right to punish others. But if she still wanted to argue, she would definitely talk to His Highness about this. She didn't understand why she wore such an expression while talking about fairness. She would tell His Highness everything she had seen and everything she had said. The servant quickly bowed her head to the ground, apologizing to the lady, but she just told her to know her place. At this moment, her body felt unable to hold on any longer, and she collapsed to the ground. Currently, there was an intruder, but these were priests, and their duty was to protect the body. She had to run because she needed to be safe. The priests were not the target, so there was no need for unnecessary bloodshed. The green-haired servant quickly left. She hated the lady so much that she didn't want to waste time protecting her in this critical moment. The servants turned their backs on her quickly, leaving only the one by her side, trying to help her up. She had gone through a lot of hardships in her life, so she could endure everything. These events were truly outrageous, and she didn't understand what they wanted from her. Did they want to kill her? Perhaps that would be better. She decided whether to stand up or just sit there and endure because she was too tired. Unexpectedly, at that moment, he ran out and deflected the sword that was falling straight towards her. He asked them why they dared to touch his woman. Now she didn't know if this was a dream, but now she knew. The two returned to the palace with his help, and she was able to walk. He even taught her how to open the collar around her neck and suggested that he remove it. Unexpectedly, she took it and immediately placed it around his neck, leaving the servants in shock. She smiled brightly because she knew that pink suited him well and said he was just her obedient puppy. But when she woke up, she found herself lying in bed, and next to her was him, sleeping, still wearing that pink collar. After she woke up, he also woke up shortly after her. He wanted to ask her why she could speak the language of the people here. He didn't understand what had happened to her, but she didn't know either. Suddenly, her head hurt like it was being hammered. She heard a strange voice inside her head, and her body just moved on its own. But he pulled her close and said that nothing would change overnight. He would take care of everything, and he hugged her tightly. He just wanted to hold her because her body was cold from being in the rain. He just wanted to warm her with his own warmth. No one here would harm her, so she should relax and sleep. Sometimes he seemed a bit strange and a little crazy, but his hands were never indecent or went any further, so perhaps he wasn't a bad person. She didn't understand how she could fall asleep next to someone like this. She thanked him for saving her from those bad people today, and by midnight she was alone in bed. He went out to listen to a report from a servant about the Kwai's gang, leaving a message. If the compensation for the assassins who had died wasn't paid, they would cause endless trouble. But he thought that if they demanded compensation, they should just give it to them, and the servant felt they were good at doing business. They dared to demand compensation like that after attempting to assassinate the lady. She didn't understand why they dared to hold him responsible for the death of those assassins. Any organization training assassins would usually stay hidden in the shadows, but these gangs operated openly. This was because of their current money-hungry leader. He was the type who would dig through garbage to find a coin if he had to. That scoundrel would never do anything that didn't bring him profit, so he knew who was behind the issue. The mastermind who hired the assassins could only be one of the nobles in the neutral faction. Whether it was the Emperor's faction led by him, the neutral faction, or the Duke's faction, they all wanted to recruit as many nobles as possible to their side to build their own power and influence. Initially, the strategy of using her daughter to expand the influence of the neutral faction didn't involve siding with the Duke's faction or the Emperor's faction. That's why she initially intended to marry her daughter to a noble in the neutral faction. So there were many people who didn't want the Duke's daughter to become the crown princess. This had truly impacted her future moves, and whoever masterminded the assassination aimed to prevent that from happening. He spread the rumor that the Grand Duke's men were behind this. Even though the Grand Duke didn't have much support and always remained inactive, he still had a reason to target her. Once the rumor spread widely, the nobles would start acting in their interests, and the culprit would eventually reveal themselves. He had to pull out the firewood under the pot as quickly as possible, but the old priest was trying to kneel before him to atone for his sins. He couldn't believe this was happening just a few days before the sacred spring festival. He knew this man was a master at using money to deceive others, and now he was about to die. If the future crown princess were to be assassinated in the sanctuary, who would be held responsible? The priest promised to increase security around the sanctuary and ensure no one could break in again. No novice priest had been killed, so they wouldn't murder anyone for free. However, the priests would be duly punished for fleeing instead of protecting the future crown princess. He also heard that there was a woman who had disrespected the lady, and that was the green-haired girl named Anita. She managed the entire group of novice priests with excellent scores, but her future would be completely sealed, and she had lied excessively to save herself. She had been punished with a harsh slap, but he said not to punish anyone and to leave her be. There must be a reason for their disrespectful behavior. He would send someone to monitor them and also secretly meet with Duke Rommel. He would return before the sacred ceremony took place, so make sure the lady didn't leave her room until then. He had them deliver the precious powder, more valuable than gold, to the stream and forced them to provide it for free. A few days after the spring festival, a crucial day for the lady, they had waited for the day of the sacred spring festival to be organized smoothly and perfectly. She had to quickly prepare her outfit before he arrived, even though she didn't understand what they were saying. The preparations were almost complete, and once the lady arrived at the palace, she would be taken to the prepared stream. She was in her room, shouting at the servants because she didn't want to try on the clothes they had prepared for her. Resisting at this point was futile, and she had to wear them before he arrived. She felt miserable enough already, and when he walked in, he wondered why everything was so messy. She immediately interrogated him about why he wanted her to wear these gaudy lingerie outfits, and he remembered she had cried in his arms over those outfits. However, he seemed to spoil her too much, and she had become spoiled, thinking he was a good person. But no, he was truly disappointing and couldn't be trusted in this palace. He even said that if they showed her any disrespect, she should tell him, and he would fire them all. She just felt that everyone here was good except for him, so why didn't he just get rid of himself? He feared that would never happen and slowly took out a white powder from his pocket, sprinkling it on her, making her collapse. He decided he would personally bring the new crown princess to the stream. She was dressed in sexy clothes and taken to the beautiful stream inside the church. This place was called the Sacred Spring, and she could soak in the stream to wash away all her sins. Both she and he would go down there to bathe, so she suddenly realized why he had made her wear those thin, sheer garments. So he was plotting this against her, but he was trying to reassure her to stay calm. She could grit her teeth and glare at him as much as she wanted, but it wouldn't scare him. She planned to stand up and leave, but she fell right into his arms. She couldn't move for a while, so she had to let him help her. Resisting was of no use to her, and her stubborn attitude only excited him more. He asked how to say "you've aroused me" in Korean, referring to her. She was surprised that he spoke Korean and felt he had been lying to her all along, but he remembered he had never said he didn't know Korean. He gently lifted her up. He had his reasons for not revealing that he could speak her divine language. Every Saintess was evaluated based on the number of languages they could speak and how they reacted in situations like this. It was suitable for the holy knights depending on their appropriate ranks. However, she had been chosen as the crown princess, so this was naturally formalized for them. The two walked down to the stream, and it seemed she had calmed down. They had also added the powder he requested into the stream, but from now on, she wanted him to be honest with her about everything. She always wondered if he had kidnapped her or if her mother had forced him to do it. She knew nothing about this place but asked him to tell her a few things about it. He thought it was time for her to accept the truth. Beating around the bush would waste a lot of time. Her red hair looked beautiful at that moment, making him compliment her. She didn't have red hair because her original hair color was black. By the way, she wanted to ask what he had done to her hair when she first arrived. He hadn't allowed her to look in the mirror until now for a reason, and if she was curious about the reason, she should look in the mirror and find out. The mirror was placed in the center of the stream, deep underwater. She couldn't even move her body on her own, so why not open her mouth and ask him for help? If she wanted, he could take her to the mirror. And she thought he wanted her to beg for help. Not begging, but rather, if she clung to him and asked him to take her there, he would reconsider this matter. But she quickly pulled away and decided it would be better to go to the mirror by herself. Water splashed onto him as she dived into the stream. The stream was much deeper than she thought, and she couldn't see the bottom. She didn't think she could go down there by herself, and if anything went wrong, she would just have to wait for death. But she could stop being stubborn and ask him for help. After all, what she could do was seek help from others, and that's what he wanted. But this time she wouldn't cling to him and beg, she wouldn't rely on him at all. She wouldn't let him manipulate her anymore, and managed to reach the mirror deep underwater. At that moment, inside the mirror was her reflection. But it was also that of Rommel, the most beautiful in the kingdom. She introduced herself as Beatrice Rommel, and at this moment she doesn't understand what's happening to her here. She is confused about the situation, but she also can't breathe, having been underwater for too long. If she doesn't return to the surface in time, she will die. Unexpectedly, she was pulled into the mirror swiftly. Although Rommel knows this is painful, it is also fortunate that she did not beg Rahicht for help. This place is Rommel's inner world, or more precisely, the world of someone whose body is possessed by another. It turns out that the voices often echoing in her head and controlling her body were actually this Rommel. She knows she should hold on a bit longer, but truly, she can't. She is aware of what she is thinking and has numerous questions. However, her questions will eventually be answered, but first, this dull place needs some decoration. Before her now is a lavish banquet table, and she wonders if this is a dream. As she said, she is possessing her body, but if she is currently in someone else's body, where is her original body? She isn't sure about that, but there is no reason to revert to her original state. She has seen all of her memories, and even if she returns, there will be no one waiting for her. Just like her, she has no reason to go back, but asking about her body isn't because she wants to return to it. She simply doesn't understand how she woke up in someone else's body. When she starts questioning how this happened, there will be no end to these questions. The more she asks, the more her head will ache. All she knows is that the ceremonial prayers lasted for 1,000 days until they died, resulting in her being summoned to this world. Honestly, she doesn't know how this happened, but the tea she is drinking doesn't have any taste. Reflecting on it, they shouldn't have been swapped like this. Thinking carefully, she can't hear any sounds here either. She wondered if the hellish demons had expelled her because it was too crowded there, and if she couldn't return to the old world, she would have to stay here. Therefore, she would no longer see her mother and little sister, and would escape their torment. More importantly, here she would achieve what she had always longed for. Wasn't freedom what she desired? To spend the rest of her life in freedom, she should quickly go with her to this place. This is her gift to her, and it is his twisted soul. It is a tangled yarn, and from now on, she will slowly untangle each strand of that bastard's soul one by one. She will have to untangle all of this mess, but just give it a try, maybe things will get better. She knew she could do it on the first try, but she didn't understand why she had to untangle his soul. Once she did, he would become calmer and less erratic. The more she untangled, the more he would depend on her, and when it was all done, he would kneel at her feet, crying and begging. She wished she could witness that moment firsthand. It turned out she was summoned here just to untangle this mess of yarn. Only a saint like her could enter the inner world of the Holy Night, and she could see this yarn only because she was by her side. Therefore, while she was still conscious, she would explain and analyze what she knew. During the day, she only needed to learn how to become the crown princess, and at night, she would help her stay awake to practice those theories. But when she heard the term crown princess, she couldn't bear it. Why did she have to become the crown princess when she didn't want to be such a person? However, she was only giving her valuable advice, so she should stop being foolish and listen to her quickly. From now on, never say that she didn't want to become the crown princess ever again. She will tell you the reason. The moment you refuse the position of crown princess, they will kill you immediately, or they will think it is a waste of a saint and sell you as a cheap slave. Knowing this, do you still dare to oppose becoming the crown princess? but it is an important position, too much for you, and quite stressful, so she gives you a piece of advice. Pretend to be the crown princess until you find a way to escape. Since you have taken her essence, at least you should help her a bit, right? Do you intend to let this precious body become a toy for those filthy holy knights? You immediately apologize to the person in front of you, realizing that this is no longer your body and you have been selfish. The two of you join forces, and now you will have to learn what she teaches. It's not just men who need to stand up straight. Women should also lift their chin, push their chest out, and stand tall. You need to be confident and self-respecting so that they won't look down on you. Moreover, you must use your power to recruit many people to your side. Make full use of what you have, even if they are your friends, and you must remember the name Padre Ian Severek. He is her friend but also a true warrior who hates this holy regime. At first he may get angry with you, but don't panic, be strong and say these deep words to him. I can't believe you dare to be aggressive towards a weak lady like me, and yet you dare to call yourself a knight. No matter who you were before, do as you please, but while you are in her body, smile like a madman and live a luxurious and dazzling life, understand? That's enough for today, because if you stay here too long, your body won't be able to endure it anymore. There is no more time, so the two of you quickly lead each other to the gate where you were brought here. She will tell you the horrible truths about this world in the time to come. She was swept away by the water and unexpectedly quickly surfaced, coughing uncontrollably. Seeing this, he quickly held her in his arms, worriedly patting her back to expel all the water from her body. He gently scolded her, saying she was really foolish. If he hadn't saved her, she would have lost her life. Did she know that? He wondered if she regretted confirming the truth, but all she could think about was how terrible the taste of the water from that stream was. He was surprised that after nearly dying while searching for the mirror in the stream, she was now complaining about the taste of the water. To her, it tasted like some spices that the servants used to sneak into her food. She would ask him what he had given her to eat, and if it was bath salts. Once she ate or inhaled the scent of this powder, it would help reduce stress by changing her surrounding environment, making her let down her guard around the people of this world. This was no different from deceiving her. Realizing he could no longer hide the truth, he decided to tell her everything she could hear from him. This is a sacred land ruled by the royal dynasty, and they here call it Utrald. This is where the first Saintess appeared from the holy nation, and it is also where the sanctuary was built to praise this legend. Here they call her place the holy nation, and people from that world are called saints. Simply put, this place is unlike the world she knows. He meant that she came from another world, and only her soul arrived here. According to their history, 1,862 saintesses have come to this world, with at least 1 to 2 appearing each year. So there were others like her, but she was currently different from the other saintesses. She was the only saintess of this generation summoned to their world, and the other saintesses were not treated like her. She asked about the person she had met at the bottom of the river, and that person was the Holy Sacrifice, the body she was inhabiting under the title of Saintess called the Holy Sacrifice. The purpose of the Holy Sacrificial System is to bring the Saintess to this world, and those who participate are volunteers who offer their bodies. Only one person is summoned through the ritual in each generation. They prepared 7 sacrificial candidates, and these candidates only have to wait for the Saintess to choose them. She chose Beatrice's body, but if she was her holy sacrifice, then what was he to her? That depends on her choice. He could be the husband of the crown princess, someone supported and respected by the people, or just a bastard she despises. But she didn't believe this much because to her, she was nothing more than an experiment to these people. Every word that came out of his mouth made her want to vomit, but there was one thing he didn't know. She would help him untangle the mess in his heart. She also awaited the moment he would kneel at her feet, as the person in the river had said. Seeing her resisting him made him somewhat amused. He unexpectedly pinned her beneath him. They said the Saintess usually chooses the sacrificial candidate most compatible with their body. The shell she was inhabiting belonged to an arrogant prostitute who always looked down on those around her. She only thought about herself, which made him want to strangle her. Her pulse at her neck seemed stable, indicating that she wasn't scared at all. But why should she be scared? He didn't intend to harm her. But at this moment he bent down and kissed her neck, making her quickly push him away. He was raising some monsters within the palace's grounds. Did she want to know why they obeyed him as their true master? Not only because he was the crown prince, but also because he was much stronger than them. Today he would show her that he was indeed her master. She was terrified, not knowing what to do because she didn't want to be his plaything in this situation. She recalled the teaching that not only men should stand tall, but women should do the same. She had to be confident and dignified so they wouldn't look down on her. She had to be confident and possess dignity, so she quickly cupped his face and said that he was truly handsome. More than that, he was different. Not because he was rich, but because his status was so noble. Did he think he had everything because of that? But think carefully, that is all he has. In her world, people usually date first. Then, the man proposes to the woman before moving on to marriage. Why should the noble crown princess endure such forced imposition? So, you're implying we should court each other like the people in your world, he asked. She only wished for one thing from him, to be honest with her. Besides his handsome appearance or his wealth and status, what else did he have? Did he have the confidence to win her heart without those things? He found it amusing because, apart from his status and wealth, she didn't need anything else. She said she wanted his respect because, in her world, she was always rejected and oppressed. She couldn't live with a man who didn't even know how to respect her. But to him, she had no other choice. She firmly replied that she could run away. Her soul came from a completely different world. Did she think she could escape? He was the only one here who could help her. But actually, she knew the person who could help her was Podre. Hearing this name made his face darken, and she felt a bit of fear in her heart. If things continued like this, he would gain the upper hand. But the voice in her head told her not to avoid his gaze. She shouldn't act like prey in front of a predator. Did she remember what she had been taught? If she felt more scared, she should raise her chin higher and straighten her chest. At this moment he sighed and said he would do as she wished. This surprised her greatly. He said he would respect her as she wished because she was his future crown princess. She was frightened by his tone because it didn't make her feel comfortable at all. To him she was indeed an annoying woman, and he carried her away because the cold steps and her delicate body needed proper care. Now she needed to become a perfect crown princess, so a teacher would come to teach her soon. She would also move to a new bedroom, and he warned her never to mention another man's name while being with him. Although a bit noisy, the ceremony ended successfully. A month had passed since that day, and the trees had gradually shed their leaves, covering the ground in white snow. During that time, she had learned a lot. She not only learned about the politics, culture, economy, and diplomacy of this place, but also about the holy knights of the dynasty. The power of these holy knights was compared to that of superheroes, which explained the dynasty's strength. However, these knights paid for their power by enduring bouts of madness. Each holy knight had a different inner world, but they all shared one thing in common. When the holy knight went mad, their inner world would gradually turn black and tragic, with no light at all. But the Saintess could help the holy knight regain sanity through a power called telepathy. If a Saintess was paired with a holy knight, she could focus on purifying that knight. If not, she could purify many other holy knights, but none of them would be completely purified. After learning about the holy knights and their condition, she decided she would never pair with him. Otherwise, she would never escape from this place. Unexpectedly, Podre, the person she mentioned before, appeared. He walked straight to her and mentioned his late friend's name. The servant reminded him to behave properly in front of the future crown princess. He had come only to meet the person who had taken over his only friend's body. This was a restricted area, and His Highness the Crown Prince would return tomorrow after the banquet. By then, he should ask for His Highness's permission to meet the lady. At this moment, the Crown Prince was not present, so she seized the opportunity to talk to this person. She had to draw him to her side by any means necessary. This was what she had been instructed to do. She asked the servant if she could have some privacy with the knight, because she wanted to talk to him. The servant was very surprised, but she said it would be quick. So the servant had no choice but to agree and step outside. She understood why he behaved this way. In his eyes, she could be an uninvited guest who had taken over his friend's precious body. He was angry when she called him by his name as if they were close, but if she said this, it might be hard to believe, because she had met the soul of this body. She had indeed met her, but the consciousness of the sacrificial vessel couldn't coexist with the Saintess. As he realized this and was about to leave, she called him back. She decided to tell him what the soul had said if things were like this. Did he think she really wanted to marry someone like him? That was what the soul wanted to tell him. He smiled because that was exactly how she would have responded if he expressed his feelings. But there was more. The soul had told her many things about him. She knew they were childhood friends and their parents had betrothed them to each other. She also heard that they were inseparable since childhood. Back then, he was quite weak and shy, always bullied by the surrounding children. She had saved him many times from those bullies, so it was hard to imagine he had become a knight now. At this moment he started to cry, but she didn't intend to make him cry. This man appeared cold on the outside, but perhaps he truly loved the soul of this body. She went to wipe his tears, but he refused and turned away in resistance. She then entered his inner world, a place filled with icy snow. Tears of empathy flowed down her cheeks as she understood what he was going through. Once she connected with someone else's inner world, she couldn't sever the connection at will. If she did, both would lose their minds, and everything would be over. Unlike the exterior of the inner world, he seemed chaotic, and the crown prince's soul was a tangled mess needing to be unraveled. But here she had to arrange the broken stones under her feet correctly. She remembered how the crown prince had treated her more gently since that day, and she thought she could apply this method to the knight in front of her. If she wanted the knight on her side, she had to arrange things properly as much as possible. Even though this made her endure the biting cold, with her hands and body trembling, she persisted to finish it. She didn't know how long she had been there and collapsed next to the wall. It seemed to have been 6 hours, but time in the inner world and reality was entirely different. She apologized for tormenting the body like this, but suddenly the place became too warm. The soul tried to call her not to fall asleep and wake up quickly, but she couldn't endure it any longer. When she opened her eyes, she was back in her room, and the knight was beside her. He told her not to use this body recklessly because it wasn't hers. Clearly, he didn't want to do this now, but he had to hold her in his arms. He couldn't let the body of his beloved friend freeze to death, so he used his body to warm her. He hoped she wouldn't misunderstand his intentions and shouldn't underestimate the cold of Winter Airy Harbor. Telepathy with him could be dangerous, and the price could be her life. Just as she raised her hand to push him away, she realized her hand had lost feeling. This meant everything that happened to her in someone else's inner world affected her body in reality. The people of Winter Airy had the power to transmit warmth to others through direct contact. If the cold had seeped deeply into her body, he had no other choice. He kissed her, but if she kept resisting, she could push him away. He wouldn't do anything else, even if her fingertip were to fall off. She thought this holy knight would become gentle if their inner world was stabilized, but it didn't seem to apply to this person. The cold only lessened slightly because he had only just begun to warm her, so the next wave would come soon. She fainted again unconsciously, and he had to strip down to hold her close, assuring her that everything would be better soon. While she was unconscious, she suddenly heard her younger sister calling her. Her sister was sitting beside the piano, illuminated by the stage lights. Her sister said that the man had lost his lover and was crying because of her, but she was so cold. Why didn't she have a single tear at this moment? Thinking back, she hadn't shed a tear since coming to this world. Could it be that she truly hoped to find herself here? Even if she was reincarnated in another body, despair and frustration suited her more. She screamed that she didn't cry because there was no reason to. Even if she played the piano terribly in this world, she didn't have to live as a shadow under her family's control. But her sister laughed loudly, saying it was as if the bond between them had been completely severed. Unfortunately, they still had matters to resolve, and she gave a frightening smile. When she woke up, she realized it was a nightmare she had just experienced, and beside her was a man. She thanked him for saving her life and acknowledged that she knew this was someone else's body, and that he only saved her because of that body. But to her surprise, it wasn't the knight but the crown prince. He reminded her that he had warned her not to mention another man's name in front of him. She had made a continuous mistake, but didn't know he would return at that moment. There were many things she wanted to say, but now she had to hold back, because her head was spinning and her back was aching. She couldn't believe she had brought another man into her room within less than a month of being here. To him, she appeared even more promiscuous than she looked. She responded that she didn't mean to, but he interrupted her. Did she dare say that the telepathy with that knight was unintentional? He accused her of being a failure as a woman, causing it to happen. She apologized for her lack of decorum, admitting she needed to calm down. She didn't need to waste energy soothing his anger. As a lady, she needed to be cautious with her words and actions, but she had been thoughtless in that situation. It was entirely her fault, and he angrily threw his sword at the painting next to them. He was furious, not understanding why the bastard from Winter Airy dared to act that way towards her. He then asked how the knight's inner world compared to his. To her, his inner world was like a tangled ball of yarn, a plaything for humans, whereas the knight's inner world was a desolate ice castle that she had to rebuild. He didn't understand that she had spent the whole night doing that, but she didn't realize it took so long. But the truth was just that, and now he wanted to set conditions between them. He demanded the right to physical contact with her, excluding intercourse. If she was confident she could close her heart to him, then he would use his most potent weapon against her to make it fair. She asked, and if she still didn't fall for him, then what? How could he bestow the esteemed position of crown princess on a woman who constantly resisted him? Within 100 days, he vowed to make her kneel and beg to become his crown princess. She wondered if being a crown prince meant he had nothing better to do, but she accepted his challenge. In return, she had one condition and recalled what her sister had said in her recent dream. She might wake up in a completely different body, but despair and fragility still suited her at this moment. He didn't understand why she was chosen to be the crown princess and couldn't fathom the god's reasoning. Other saintesses fought for status here, but was she being calculating or just foolish? She could get what she wanted by winning over her fiancé with sweet words whispered in his ear. She was thinking she had to find a way to survive while pretending to be obedient, but the voice inside her told her not to be stubborn, that she could only survive by becoming the crown princess. Some people would want a luxurious life with many jewels and power, but she only wanted a simple life with the person she loved. The knight's visit was her chance, and she should run away with him while he was still here. But doing so would be suicide. At this moment, the items the crown prince requested earlier were ready. He ended the meal and wanted to take her to a place to show her something. He approached her and invited her on a date. Everything in the room was for her, and she was amazed at what she saw. He had brought in a piano and several string instruments, along with sheet music on the shelf to the right, even though she had only mentioned wanting one instrument. Since he didn't know which instrument she liked, he prepared everything as he knew from her world. She was very surprised that he understood her world so well. Previous saintesses had spread their culture for quite some time. If she wanted, he would also hire a music teacher to teach her, but she didn't need that. For a long time she had struggled to become a piano master. He didn't know how hard she had worked to hone her skills. With the piano, she had a love-hate relationship, hating it to the bone yet being obsessed with it. It was the only hope she had left, and now her fingers glided over the keys. She played a winter melody because it was winter now, but he thought she was trying to hint at the night. He seemed more jealous than she had imagined, but he asked if she knew any songs that weren't related to the seasons. At this moment, he gently took her hand and said he just wanted to hear a melody that reflected her true self. She could learn a lot from performers by listening to them play. They played with genuine emotion, without any superior skills. It wasn't complicated at all, and he knew someone who played in a very simple, almost foolish way like her. A clear, straightforward melody suited her more than convoluted, meandering tunes. For example, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, which he didn't hesitate to play for her, leaving her astonished. She was so talented that he couldn't understand why she played the piano in a way that didn't suit her at all. He didn't know who had taught her to play. Initially, it was her mother, but after that, she didn't have a proper teacher. Occasionally, her younger sister would teach her, correcting small mistakes and flaws in her playing, as if throwing a bone to a poor dog. Her younger sister was a genius, perfect and renowned as a piano fairy. Her skills were truly as impressive as her reputation, and she was very envious of her sister. That was how she tried to escape her cage, but in some areas she could never surpass her sister. Did he also think she was foolish? She shouldn't play the piano again and thought her fingers were despicable. She'd had tried to reach for the stars but ended up with only humiliation. To him, most people felt threatened and overshadowed by the presence of a genius, and it wasn't her fault. He would introduce her to the best piano master in the kingdom so she could significantly improve her skills. That way, her sister's shadow wouldn't haunt her only hope anymore. In return, he had a request. At this moment, he leaned close to her and said he wanted her to kiss him on the lips. She felt really strange because why did his gentle and warm, deep voice make her feel so comfortable? Surely this person had a very high sense of self-esteem, so it was hard to believe that he truly understood her situation. But his eyes held the look of someone overshadowed by a genius, and this man unexpectedly teased her when he saw her quickly close her eyes. Honestly, her unexpected reaction made him slightly let down his guard. Teasing her was so much fun that if this continued, he would become addicted to teasing her, and eventually she also smiled. He said that from now on, she should always keep a smile on her face instead of frowning because, when stepping into the harsh upper class, her smile would be both a weapon and a shield to protect herself. He would soon invite nobles with titles from Marquis and above to the main hall so that he could introduce her to them first. Consider it a rehearsal to prepare for stepping into the upper class as the crown princess. Schumann Bukovac would also attend. He was a grumpy old man nearly 70 years old, but definitely the country's top pianist. He was also his former piano teacher, so she might think of another instrument to play with him. He said that she should play the cello first before showcasing her masterful piano skills. This was essential because it was an opportunity to show how talented a crown princess she was. Not only would she play musical instruments, but she would also have to dance, so there were many things to prepare. She would dance with him, even though she had never danced before, but she just needed to relax and let him lead her. At this moment, he said he would polish her to turn her into the highest quality gem, and he leaned close to her and asked what perfume she was wearing today. Thinking back, both of them needed to consider whether they were compatible before getting married. He asked if she was not curious about his bedroom skills. Just as she was still trying to understand what was happening, he placed a kiss on her lips. She knew that this man was very dangerous because the more she tried to escape, the more she would be pulled in. This situation felt like sinking into a mud pit, a pit that could take her life at any moment. After they let go of each other, he said that it was enough for today. Tomorrow he would send her a lot of books, and she should make sure to learn everything in them. Next time, it wouldn't just be an ordinary kiss. At that moment, she said she needed someone to help her change out of her cumbersome outfit. Though she also wished for a priest to be by her side, he couldn't provide that for her at the moment. Unexpectedly, she stepped forward and kissed him to beg and plead with him to bring the priest to her. At that moment, it was the Holy Night team from the Paladinus Command Office. A secret party would be held at the main hall a week later. The knight was unsure if he should attend because he wasn't certain if the crown princess would retaliate against him. After what had happened between him and the crown princess in her room, even if it was true, he shouldn't hope too much. They also couldn't extract the divine power that had occupied his sister's body and return her soul. But how could they know if they didn't try? This knight must have a way to remove the divine power inside her body. A week later at the main hall, everyone was quickly cleaning up to prepare for the ceremony. Today's gathering would welcome the most noble aristocrats, and the servants were not allowed to be lazy and had to clean until there wasn't a speck of dust left. This month, the trees were bare, and next month, the lake would freeze over. The following month was the month of the saints, and spring would begin when the flowers bloomed. The green-haired maid was jealous when she saw that the person she had once bullied had actually become the crown princess's lady-in-waiting. The banquet would be held in the Holy Hall, and the dresses and accessories she needed for the banquet had been brought here. There was still some time, so she didn't want to hear the 10 etiquette rules to conquer the aristocrats. Instead, she wanted to brush her hair because she knew exactly how she should present herself at today's banquet. Her plan was to stand as far away from the crown prince as possible, so those who had grievances with him would approach her. What she needed was the support of a faction that simply wanted Rahich to fall from power. She spent the entire week thinking about what life would be like after marrying him, and no matter how long she thought, she still believed it wouldn't be good. Living in a comfortable cage was better than being shot by a hunter while flying in the sky. At this moment, he came to the room to find her, and she had her answer for herself. The melodious music started playing, and the two of them stepped out together to greet everyone present today. The banquet began, and she made a good impression on today's audience. She didn't think these people were praising her, which was understandable. She knew that the previous owner of this body was called a mad dog, as at just 5 years old, she not only wore a dress made of flowers to a flower-themed ball, but also dressed like a man to socialize with the young gentlemen, smoking, drinking, and swearing. That's why she had many enemies, which surprised our crown princess a bit. The reputation of the body's former owner could have been at rock bottom, but based on her performance today, she could be praised by the aristocracy. So now she should use her smile as her weapon, as it was the only weapon she had. A person approached them and respectfully bowed. He was Rickson, and due to the crazy barbarian warrior's recent rampages, he hadn't heard much good news lately, but seeing that he was still in good health and hearing news of his upcoming marriage made him feel better. Currently, the borders were being threatened by them, and at night they rode on the backs of beasts to provoke the imperial soldiers. 7 of the troops had been attacked, and the biggest problem was the beasts they controlled. He believed the only solution was to locate their nests and burn their offspring. Suddenly, he turned to her and asked if she agreed with this matter. She was used to the look in his eyes now because she had received such looks from her mother and sisters for many years. That look was sarcastic, because he wanted to use that question to test her. He wanted to know what kind of person she was based on her answer. If she answered correctly, the attitude of these nobles towards her would completely change. Would she continue to be the mad dog ignored by everyone, or become the praised crown princess? But he suddenly said that a divine being like her could hardly understand such a conversation, which was understandable. Suddenly, she said she would give her opinion as a future crown princess, surprising everyone. Despite this, Beatrice asked inside if she had lost her mind because she knew nothing about the international relations of this place. But don't underestimate her, as she had studied the book he gave her at the previous banquet. She should have remained silent. Was that too hard to do? She could no longer avoid confrontations and stay silent like before. She said that she didn't know much about war, but she knew that war only brought greater hatred and anger, eventually leaving serious consequences. But that thinking only put the empire in a dangerous situation. To him, that wasn't a unique thought. He called it a radical thought, and just now, he said the only solution was to burn all the beasts and their offspring alive. But did he really intend to massacre even the newborns? That's right, because if even one was left, the flames of resistance would quickly rise. Therefore, none could be left behind. But if it were her, she would meet their leader to resolve the differences and listen to their wishes first. Her intention wasn't just ordinary conversation but diplomacy. Of course, this kingdom had a diplomatic corps, but he thought they didn't understand what we were saying, but perhaps to her, they weren't the only ones who didn't understand the issue. Victory couldn't be achieved by force alone. One must be able to win without bloodshed. Hearing these words made him angry, and he said she had overstepped her bounds. Only knights should discuss military tactics, not a young lady. But did that mean he started a conversation with her on a topic she couldn't participate in? So was his intention behind the question to embarrass her? These sharp words left him speechless. To her, he was the one unqualified to talk about this matter. As she understood, the people of the prairie were the ones he called beasts. But they killed fewer people than this kingdom's army due to his wrong decisions. He angrily said that the kingdom's soldiers were risking their lives to protect the people, and no one had the right to insult this kingdom's army, especially someone who wasn't even a knight, so she had no right to talk about it. This time, he would let it go because she didn't know, but next time there would be no such leniency. But he stood up to protect her because no matter what, no one could be disrespectful to her. He said that the rudeness of this man would be dealt with in a military court, and he would be imprisoned awaiting trial. The knight walked past her with a cold gaze, and he took over the command from him right then. Since the rude man had been taken away, he hoped everyone would continue to enjoy the banquet. He handed her a glass of wine, saying today was a day to celebrate. Despite this, she still felt like she was being used by him, as when he told her to read all those books, it was to eliminate the man just now. But when he tried to explain his actions, she didn't agree. Did he think the man would respect her after he used force against him? If he didn't want to be used as dog food, he had no choice but to do so. At this moment, she was sitting and playing the piano in front of everyone in the auditorium. The audience applauded for this wonderful performance by the future crown princess. His piano teacher also clapped and said that the young lady had truly played very well. She could play the deaf and the maiden perfectly. Her talent was a blessing to this empire. Suddenly, a girl ran up and said that the performance was mesmerizing. She had just arrived at the party and heard her playing the piano. The melodious tune made her run over immediately, but to her surprise, this was her younger sister. But this couldn't be possible because the Rommel family only had one son and one daughter, and she had never heard anyone mention another girl around her age. Suddenly, she realized that this was her biological sister from the other world. The call of sister brought back unpleasant memories, and her face didn't look very good. The piano teacher stepped in to help and said that the future crown princess simply didn't remember who she was. The girl introduced herself as Giselle Rommel, the second flower of the family, but this was also the first time the crown prince had heard that name. This was understandable, as due to health reasons, she had been away from home for a long time and had only just returned. But Beatrice was sure that the Duchess had brought her back from some slum. Finally, the cold-blooded female head of the family and a witch had arrived. This giant was the head of the Rommel family. She had many nicknames and stepped forward to face the crown prince. She wished for her second daughter to perform a beautiful piece of music to apologize for being late. She didn't understand why this performance had to be so sudden, but her sister asked if she could play first. She realized she knew this piece. It was Beethoven's Emperor. This was her real sister's favorite piece, and the one she could play most skillfully. How could she not recognize her sister's performance? Hearing this music made everyone in the room feel incredible, as if they were enjoying the melody of a fairy. She felt sad because everyone was amazed at her sister's talent, and she was foolish to think she could escape her sister by coming to this world and find happiness. While these emotions were still gnawing at her inside, the scars remained on her body from being constantly judged and compared to her sister throughout her life. At this moment, he came to her side and comforted her with his words. Her piano playing was very sincere, without high techniques or elaborate skills. He could tell that the player was a boring and simple person. A straightforward piece of music suited her better than a convoluted one, while everyone said that her sister could even organize a solo concert, and many people wanted to hear her play again. Although she had struggled for a long time, she still couldn't surpass her sister, but she couldn't give up either. That was because she had no other choice, and the only thing she knew how to do was sit down and play the piano. If she couldn't win, she didn't need to force herself. She just needed to play her own music. Instead of a winding song, she would play a piece as straight as a line. She played Beethoven's piece, making everyone fall silent to immerse themselves in the music. To him, this woman had found someone to replace his daughter on the day she lost her. He realized he had paid too much attention to her, while underestimating this duchess. The reason she brought a divine being and led her around like her daughter was to consolidate her family's position, even though she was destined to become the future crown princess. When her music stopped, everyone was silent, and the piano teacher couldn't help but praise her. He could feel the pain and solace encapsulated in the music and was truly moved. But at that moment, her sister approached her and said she wanted to talk a little about music. However, she quickly refused, saying to leave it for later and that she wanted to be left alone to rest. At this moment, the knight came to protect her and blocked the rude sister. He said that since she hadn't officially debuted in the upper class yet, she could be punished for her lack of etiquette. If this happens again, it won't just be let go with a warning. Her sister's hand was squeezed so painfully that she could do nothing but endure it. The crown princess was taken to the resting area by the crown prince because he seemed tired. This made her sister feel like going crazy, and her face was no longer calm. She was escorted to her room by the knight, and along the way, she tried to make conversation with him. She was glad that the distance between them no longer felt as distant as before and had grown closer. The second daughter was angry because her mother had said she would turn her into the star of the upper class, but they left while she was humiliated in front of everyone. Although today wasn't her official debut, she still wanted to leave a good impression on the high-ranking nobles. However, by the end of the party, no one cared about her performance. Even though her daughter was very angry, the mother remained incredibly calm. Being angry wouldn't change the fact that she had failed to gain Schumann Bukowicz's attention. Unexpectedly, both of her older sisters had also arrived in Bellegram and were currently in front of the Holy Hall. She should address her as Madam instead of Mother, because she wasn't the real Giselle. Her performance today was poor, so she would have to endure a rather harsh lesson. She was carefully brought back to her room thanks to Podra, who didn't forget to praise her, saying that her piano performance today was excellent, making her unable to hide her joy. Afterward, she felt her legs give way. Her excellent piano playing even surprised Beatrice. She sensed that the person was her sister from before, even though there wasn't concrete evidence to confirm this. But just hearing her sister play the piano, she knew it. Her sister had probably recognized her too. If so, they should quickly report this because it seemed that the Duchess had brought her back from some slum. All divine beings summoned here illegally must be reported to the Holy Hall immediately. These divine beings were summoned here by immoral people, like Duchess Rommel, who then sold them as sex slaves. Selling these beings to corrupt holy knights like that, she couldn't understand why the Duchess would do such a thing. That woman used divine power as a weapon by exploiting the power of divine beings. She forced them to form spiritual bonds with the holy knights. If the Duchess forced Gazelle to bond with numerous holy knights, bad things would happen. She could turn those holy knights into pawns for the Rommel family. She suddenly felt a pang of worry for Padre, but reassured herself that he would be okay. She had already marked Padre internally, so whatever the Duchess tried would be useless against him. At this moment, she felt incredibly nauseous, but the person who handed her medicine was a stranger. This was Ephoas, Rahich, his younger brother, and his mother was the Emperor's mistress. He should have introduced himself sooner, but at least today he finally got to meet her. He warned her not to do anything stupid if she left this room. No one would help her, so she should drink the medicine he gave her. Though she appreciated the gesture, she refused to take the unknown medicine. If he said he made it himself, she needed him to drink it first before she did. After he drank it and showed no adverse effects, she still felt a sense of relief knowing she was cautious. However, she then threw the medicine to the ground and said she didn't need it. Ephoas was quite pleased and amused to meet such an interesting sister-in-law. But it had been 3 days since he had eaten anything, so could she get him something to eat? Regarding Padre, she had very distinct thoughts, and he did too. Even though her body was possessed by another soul, how could one person change so much and shine so brilliantly? In contrast, the Beatrice he knew had eyes like those of a dying person. Her eyes were filled with apathy, indifference, and powerlessness, making anyone who looked into them feel suffocated. But Regria was different, with a determined vigilance deep in her eyes. He thought he shouldn't complicate matters since she was no longer Beatrice. While he was patrolling the palace, he suddenly found a night guard unconscious. The person next to him said that he had been fine earlier, but after patrolling the royal garden and returning, he found him passed out like that. He picked up a vial that smelled of Minamacesa, a type of flower. If someone absorbed the essence from its root extract, they would lose their memory of the past 24 hours. But who did this remained a mystery. It was someone who didn't want anyone to know they had met the future crown princess privately. His Highness couldn't be informed about this since he was meeting with Marquis Resno and wasn't present. He quickly made the knight next to him drink this, because His Highness couldn't find out. If this matter got out, it would be a reason to confine Beatrice under the pretext of increasing security. Everything he did was for Beatrice, and now in Regria's room, the boy was happily eating a sandwich. He said that his brother was trash and she truly deserved someone much better. For the lady's sake, he told her to leave the Holy Hall if she wanted to know more about his brother. When turning left at the entrance of the main hall, she would see a neatly trimmed thorn bush among the grass. Inside that thorn garden was an old stone tower. Searching around the tower, she would find a switch to open a secret passage. There, she would find something incredibly shocking and learn the secrets of this place, as well as the true nature of the pious Herrick. She didn't know what was inside that passageway. He thought she was just a pet raised at home. But it seemed she was only pretending to be controlled and obedient to everyone here. She wasn't scared enough to scream but remained calm when she saw a strange man in her room. Yet she was cautious enough to be wary of the drink someone offered her. Above all, she was very daring and unafraid of risks, and as for what was inside the tower, he had to keep it a secret, making her feel as if she was being toyed with. However, it seemed he had truly fallen for her. Would she want to marry him? She wouldn't have to get pregnant, and they could live happily together. Surely that would be very romantic. but she punched him, wondering why men in this country spoke of marriage proposals as if they were trivial matters. Was marriage a joke to them? But he only thought that she would live a long life instead of dying young like other divine beings. At this moment, there was a voice calling her name from outside the door. It turned out the knight in shining armor had come to rescue her. Unexpectedly, he embraced her from behind and kidnapped her, holding her hostage in his arms. Potter broke the door and called out his name, looking at him as if he were a monster, which hurt him deeply. Wasn't this person also carrying the bloodline of the divine beings? Why did he always act so improperly? If the knight didn't calm down soon, his grip would only tighten out of fear. Usually, the two were very willing to tolerate each other, but right now, he was very hungry, so perhaps they would play again next time. He didn't forget to thank her and left mysteriously through the black sludge on the floor. She was released, not only unharmed but also rescued by the knight once more. Judging by the knight's reaction, it seemed true that he was the half-brother of the crown prince. She was sitting in deep thought inside the palace, causing the hero to wonder. Instead of pondering over this, she thought she should go to the tower he had mentioned. If she did this, everything would become clear, and she would be able to relieve the burden in her heart. She suggested that the maid go for a walk to improve her sleepiness, even though the weather hadn't been good lately. The two walked in the garden, and she asked the maid about the news regarding the knight who had saved her multiple times. She also inquired if the maid had heard any strange rumors in the holy temple. She didn't understand why the place was so quiet after everything that had happened the previous day. The security wasn't tightened, but perhaps that was better for her. After a while, she saw the stone tower that he had mentioned yesterday, but the maid informed her that it might rain soon, so they should return. She didn't want the maid to get into trouble because of her, so she thought of a way to send her back. She let her dress get caught on a tree branch and said, "What will happen to my reputation if someone sees me like this?" So the maid quickly went to find help and rushed back to the castle. Taking advantage of this, she headed straight into the stone tower to uncover the truth inside. He was sitting in the carriage returning to the castle after an important negotiation. What worried him now was that the Duchess was holding her sister, more precisely the divine entity within her. So they were a pair of sisters both serving as divine entities. Although this was a rare case, it wasn't unheard of. There had been a scandal, known as the Fox Jaw incident, involving Agnes Lindwood Valcando Warwick. This happened in the year 372, where there were two sisters, both divine entities, with Agnes being the elder and Susanna the younger. Agnes didn't want to marry Valcando Warwick, and when she met Susanna at a party, a Fox Jaw incident occurred. This was the phenomenon where two sisters from the Holy Land reincarnated into two different bodies, swapped places. After that, the elder sister fled, pretending to be the younger. But for some reason, she returned to her old body. She then went mad, and that was when the story came to light. Worse, the husband found out the truth 3 years after they were married and already had a daughter. If such a thing happened now, it would be a huge scandal, so she must not meet her sister. At this moment, the carriage suddenly braked sharply, and he knew that something dangerous was approaching. He smelled blood and went out to check around himself. It turned out that the person sitting in the carriage at this moment was his younger brother, who was now greeting him. He was always alone and didn't even have a weapon for self-defense. What if he was ambushed like this? But to him, he was the only weapon he could use, although being overly confident would cost him dearly. Thanks to his elder brother, he had managed to starve for 3 days, but how did he know to set a trap to prevent him from meeting his future sister-in-law? From the beginning, he shouldn't have angered the crown prince. He couldn't understand why his brother dared to send an assassin to harm the future crown princess. But he claimed he didn't know about this, even though he was the master of Quais. This matter needed to be seriously confirmed. He didn't kill people unless there was some benefit to him. After all, he considered himself very professional. Suddenly, he realized he was being ambushed here by archers. To him, even the way his brother took revenge was pathetic and cowardly like a sewer rat. Now he was even using barbarians as his men. The one locked in the dungeon who hadn't eaten anything was Viken. He wondered how his brother could bring such filthy beasts here. It seemed they were looking for their comrades. Truly a bunch of ignorant savages. Meanwhile, she was on the other side of the castle, enduring the pouring rain. Fortunately, the sky was quite gloomy. Otherwise, she wouldn't have noticed a faint light from inside. She thought it was somewhere around here, and with just a flick of a switch, the wall mysteriously opened. She looked at the passage inside and, already wet from the rain, didn't hesitate to venture deeper. She couldn't believe there was such a hidden place within the castle grounds. As she walked on her own, unexpectedly, she tripped and fell, rolling down to the ground and landing in front of an ancient stone door. Inside, a strange light was emanating, but as she entered, the place had a very foul smell. It seemed like this was just an ordinary prison, but she didn't understand what he was hiding in such a place. She heard the sounds of a man being tortured by another man. It seemed the prisoner was incredibly stubborn and unyielding. Even though the salt water had made his skin sting painfully, he didn't utter a single sound. Then, a whip was brought out to punish the monsters. She hid behind a stone slab and watched all these cruel acts being carried out. The young man was tied with his hands behind his back, his body covered in countless wounds. Despite enduring such brutal beatings that made his skin bleed, he didn't let out a single word. The jailer was furious, perhaps because the man in front of him had caused him much injustice and trouble. Yet, despite all this, the man remained silent, enduring everything without making a sound. She had to cover her mouth to stifle any surprised sounds. She couldn't understand what this man had done to deserve such a severe beating. The whipping was too cruel for her, and she couldn't bear the sight in front of her. Even though he was beaten continuously, he didn't cry out, but it seemed he had seen her. Frightened, she crouched down behind the stone slab, unsure of what to do next. Surely he had seen her. But unexpectedly, she saw the crown prince entering, followed by his servant. She tried to hide behind the stone slab, without making any noise. It seemed like he understood the situation very well and wanted to personally speak to the prisoner. He ordered his friends to be brought out, and perhaps what followed was a terrifying end. She recognized his voice but wondered why he was here. He approached the prisoner and began the interrogation. Was the prisoner expecting his barbarian friends to come and rescue him? But the crown prince had already captured his friends and brought them here, forcing him to look at them closely. Only 2 of his friends were brought here, while all the others had already died. If you don't want your friends' heads to roll on the ground, you must quickly reveal where their base is located. After that, I will release everyone. The people of the prairie always remain steadfast in their beliefs. It sounds great, but it's best to cooperate with me while I'm still merciful, he said, but the man kneeling on the ground continued to hold his ground. They believed that they would reach the land of warriors and go to heaven after dying here without revealing any information. He said that heaven didn't exist, but this didn't discourage those present. Watching his friends being strangled to death one by one made him scream in agony. Suddenly, the prisoner opened his mouth and said he would tell the story of a demon. You are the son who was not acknowledged by your father. I pity you, and you should be the one screaming in rage. At that moment, he used his lightning to turn the last friend into a charred corpse. She couldn't understand what she had just witnessed. Had that person truly died so quickly? How could someone die just like that? At this point, the prisoner kept yelling to be killed, but he couldn't bring himself to kill him. Instead, he would continue to bring his friends here until he revealed what he wanted to know. You are the demon, and from now on, you will pay for pitying a demon like me, he declared. Suddenly, the prisoner laughed maniacally as if he had gone mad. She was terrified, hiding behind the stone slab, seeing that he wasn't joking or pretending. It felt like a horrifying nightmare. She couldn't tell if this was truly the person who had always been by her side. She couldn't stay here any longer and had to escape before it was too late. She needed to get out before they noticed her. But unexpectedly, the door was closed. If she opened it, they would surely hear, and he would come here. But she couldn't stay for another second, and at this moment he also heard the sound of her high heels. It seemed that he had an uninvited guest at this moment. He ordered his men to capture her because this secret couldn't be exposed. Deep down, she had hoped he was a good person. Even though he was selfish and mean, she had never considered him a demon. But now, thanks to his younger brother, she knew she had to stay away from him. By any means, she would have to escape from here. She was caught sitting at the foot of the castle. Even though he was standing in the rain, no sign of intrusion had been found. However, he saw a piece of her dress caught on a tree. He asked where she was and led 2 servants with him. Holding the piece of her dress, he yelled for her to come out. She was currently in the bathroom, according to the maid, and he walked straight in without hesitation. He felt it was a bit early to be bathing now, but the maid explained that she had caught a cold this morning. Her hands and feet were cold while the rest of her body was burning. so she decided to take a bath. The bathwater was very hot, and her clothes had been washed clean. He asked the maid if she had gone out today, then ordered her to step out of the bath to confirm something. But stepping out of the bath right now would make her illness worse, yet he didn't care about that. Even though her body wasn't covered by any clothing, he still didn't care. This made her furious because there were other people standing behind him. How could he make her do this? The crown princess also had her pride, and this made the maid beside her terribly scared. She didn't know what was happening, but if he respected her as the crown princess, he should wait for her in the room. She would prepare herself and come out to meet him immediately. She tried to finish everything quickly so she could go out and talk to him. She felt terrible, wondering if this was how it felt to be near a monster that hunted humans. She was so scared that she couldn't stand it. Once the war ends and there are no more people to conquer, who will he direct his cruelty and savagery towards? It turned out that she had worn her clothes into the bath, and the maid was her savior. However, the maid didn't understand why she had to hide earlier. Seeing her so panicked made the maid scared as well. Nonetheless, she couldn't tell the maid about this, not wanting to implicate her. Even so, one thing was certain: the maid would always stand by her side. She had saved the maid, so this was the maid's way of repaying her. Even if it meant sacrificing her own life, the maid would follow her to the end. She walked to the room, trying to remain calm and act as if she knew nothing. No one saw her leave the tower, but when she looked inside, no one was there. As she stepped inside, she was suddenly kissed forcefully by him, and she pushed him away. She didn't understand why he did that, but the taste of the kiss was like rainwater. If she wanted to deceive him, she should have wiped the water off her lips. At that moment, he grabbed her by the neck and asked why she had deceived him like that. Trying to fool him was pointless. So stop lying and be honest with yourself. Where have you been all afternoon, and what were you wearing when you went out? He demanded. She could only stay silent, thinking of an appropriate answer. Her usual grace and composure had vanished. She just thought about the hand squeezing her neck, feeling terrified and unable to speak. He asked why she was so frightened when she had a weapon she could use to defend herself. Now she had to use her telepathic ability to explain to him and calm him down. Out of fear, she had forgotten about this ability, but now she began to speak her answers. Why are all the secrets of this country buried so deep? Like at the bottom of the sacred well, she said, her voice trembling. Suddenly, his grip on her neck loosened. She was beginning to use her telepathic ability, and he couldn't stop it. He wanted to halt this because she was likely misunderstanding the situation. No one could enter his mind without his permission. His earlier strike had caused her to faint on the ground. She lost consciousness and was transported to the castle beneath the holy river. The sight of the crown prince's face was now what she wanted to see most. The crown princess didn't understand what had happened because the telepathic connection didn't work. Just moments ago, he almost strangled her like a beast. She felt so pitiful, as she had never asked to be summoned to this world, to wake up in this wretched country, yet she had to endure it all this time. Unfortunately, there was no way for her to return to her world, and if she left, her soul couldn't return to her rightful body. Today was Beatrice's last day here, which made her even more panicked. The fact that she had stayed made Beatrice feel terrible, but she had to leave regardless. It turned out they weren't allowed to meet in her subconscious like this. She must survive at all costs to fulfill the promise of exposing the ugly truths of this world. If it were her, she would want to know all the truths. So now she had to listen because Beatrice would only speak once. The truth was that all the Saintesses died within 10 years of giving birth to their first child, and everyone kept this secret from the Saintesses. This prevented them from banding together to protest or take any action against it. However, she could become the crown princess without having to bear children because Beatrice only wanted her to be the crown princess until she found a way to escape. Nonetheless, her game could end here if she was ready, so she should avoid the crown prince as quickly as possible. Run away and live a free, hidden life. Use Beatrice's scandal to make people admire her. Don't worry, as she should use her smile as a sword and her tears as a spear. Find an ally who can help you, but don't trust them. Actually, don't trust anyone. Finally, find someone to love because that person will help you move forward. You can love but don't trust them. You'll understand eventually because you're a smart girl. It seems time is up, and you'll survive well regardless. 2 weeks later, she still hadn't fully awakened after the blow he dealt her. The secretary suggested that he send flowers to wish her a speedy recovery or perhaps visit to check on her condition, but he said he didn't care about her, and even so, he needed to pay attention to his own health. He was working intensely and not resting properly while waiting for her to wake up. He always had trouble sleeping, so this was nothing new. However, it had been 2 weeks, and the personnel area was concerned. It was inconvenient to ask, but did he really think she was the one who broke into the tower that day? It was just a hunch because if she was there that day and saw what happened. The news that she had woken up was brought to him while he was sitting. However, she was currently unable to remember what had happened. She couldn't understand why there were bruises on her neck. As the palace's physician, he said she had temporary amnesia. People with high fevers for extended periods could suffer memory loss, and she had a high fever the day she lost consciousness. She truly had temporary amnesia, or he thought she was just pretending. He dismissed all the maids and started a conversation with her, asking about her health. She only remembered that she was taking a bath when it happened, and now he had placed his hand on her neck. When someone lies, their heart rate usually spikes, and their blood pressure rises. They also avoid eye contact or touch their nose or lips. But her demeanor remained calm, and her heart rate was normal. He said he was just checking her pulse, and fortunately it was normal. At this moment, she grasped his hand and said that his face looked thinner and paler, as if he had just returned from the dead. He replied that he just hadn't slept well, but she insisted he should take better care of himself. Suddenly, she gently stroked his face, making him feel uncomfortable. It seemed he had dealt with many things while she was ill, so she wanted to calm his energy. She didn't understand why she lifted her dress, allowing him to rest his head on her lap. But at that moment she felt Beatrice's advice was truly useful as she had managed to deceive this demon. She would survive as Beatrice said, using her smile as a sword and her tears as a spear. She remembered the motive displayed in one of the classrooms at her high school. Some encounters can change a person's life. At that time she didn't feel impressed because she never thought she would meet someone like him. But now, she understood what that motto meant. Watching him wake up in her bed brought her immense satisfaction. She asked if he would like some tea since it was still warm. Now, she wanted to venture into the world to meet more people and find a chance to escape. He hadn't slept that deeply in a long time, and she took this opportunity to ask for a favor. She wanted to go outside, but he thought she should limit her movements until she was better. However, she clarified that she didn't want to take a walk. She wanted to leave the mansion. She wanted to see other places beyond the sacred palace. Staying here felt suffocating, and when she felt bored, she could only walk around the grounds. Nonetheless, he couldn't allow her to leave the mansion. But perhaps he had forgotten their agreement. He had said he would make her beg to be the crown princess within 100 days. But at this rate, she thought she wouldn't beg for anything, and certainly wouldn't want to become the crown princess. She suggested that for their second date, she wanted to know more about him in a new place. That was why she wanted to leave, not because she wanted to escape so badly that she forgot what he proposed. He then suggested they go to the opera house next week, as he had received an invitation from Joshua that morning. Apparently, there was a private concert there, and she wanted to attend. A week later, they arrived together at the concert, drawing everyone's attention. People couldn't believe that the person accompanying the crown prince was the mad dog of the Summer Hedge family. Many people here knew who she was, so she had to be careful while sneaking around the palace. Unexpectedly, he took her to a private area and said this was a way of thanking her for helping him sleep well. She didn't expect to meet his younger brother here by chance. He was one of the patrons supporting this opera house. Of course, he should be here, but why would he be a patron when he knew nothing about music? But there was no law against someone like him sponsoring an opera house. At this point, he stood up and introduced himself to her as if they were meeting for the first time. When they exchanged a greeting hug, he said something that surprised her. He asked if she had visited the tower he mentioned long ago, which the crown prince couldn't accept. She was sitting between the two men, feeling fearful. Who would have thought they'd sit together like this? The younger brother apologized for interrupting his brother and sister-in-law's date, but his tone lacked any remorse. The crown prince explained that now she understood why the royal family had to sit in these private seats. It was to avoid sitting next to half-breeds like him. At this moment she seemed tired, and he was worried about her. He mentioned that she had been unconscious for 2 weeks, which was truly unfortunate. The two brothers continued to mock and jibe at each other, making her feel incredibly uncomfortable sitting between them. She quickly stopped them so they could fully enjoy the performance. She didn't understand why they, as brothers, kept fostering animosity toward each other. She just wanted to lie down and sleep because she felt extremely tired. She couldn't believe it when the younger brother suddenly grabbed her hand, seemingly wanting to indicate that he wished to establish a telepathic connection with her. If she connected telepathically with him here, it would be akin to committing suicide. However, she had indeed entered his inner world at this very moment. It was a beautiful beach with poisonous snakes hiding behind the bushes. So this was what his inner world looked like, truly dangerous. There were also crocodiles in the water, and she didn't know how to cleanse his inner self. In a jungle like this, a crocodile often symbolized death, but it was surprising to see crocodiles coexisting with small birds, encouraging the crocodile children and its tears falling, a symbol of death knowing how to coexist with life. Could he be the one to change the course of her life? At this moment he knew she had already been to the tower. This was indeed a clever and cunning woman. He also knew she was lying about her memory loss. The performance concluded with applause and joy from everyone. He asked her how she felt. She said it felt wonderful, like walking through a dense jungle. The other man expressed his desire to sponsor it for life, which didn't sit well with the crown prince. He ordered Ephraim to leave, as he wouldn't allow anyone to flirt with his woman like that. It seemed he was afraid his younger brother would toy with the woman who would become his sister-in-law. Perhaps Ephraim didn't want to live anymore, but he had already prepared his weapons. She didn't want them to fight here and didn't think it was necessary. However, it was just an invitation because every winter, the Mosgrada family hosted a masquerade ball. Ephraim didn't care if Rahich attended or not, but he genuinely hoped Regria would come. After making a fool of himself with his brother, he left through the black slime on the ground as usual. If she received this invitation, she would surely have to attend. The head of the Mosgrada family, quite talented, was Senual. Over the years he had managed to gather underground organizations and form alliances. Members of this group met once a year at the masquerade ball, but he changed the subject and mentioned that she wanted to stroll around the theater before heading back. As a future crown princess, she was simply curious about what life in Belgrade was like. He agreed to her request as an apology for the troubles Senual had caused. Today he would do anything she wanted, but there wouldn't be a second time. Rahich couldn't say anything without it sounding like a threat or a warning. He probably got everything in life by shouting at people and pushing them to the limit. Making him uncomfortable wouldn't benefit her, so she first had to give him what he wanted. The two of them walked hand in hand through the streets, astonishing everyone with the crown prince's presence. The crown princess to be wanted to buy a cake with a lot of cream on top. It was unbelievable that the future crown princess would want to eat street food like that. He didn't want her eating low-quality food, especially since she was already very weak. While he was grumbling, she just wanted to enjoy the food happily and gratefully. She fed him a piece of the cake she had praised as wonderful, but he only thought she had lost her mind from eating too much sugar. Unexpectedly, even at that moment, someone attempted to assassinate her by shooting a poison dart at them. Fortunately, he didn't let his guard down and took the hit for her with his hand, which quickly turned a dark, poisoned color.